We finally have had like 4 or 5 nights that we've gotten close to freezing temperatures, and then during the day it hasn't warmed up more than 60 degrees. Why this is important is a lot like in the springtime when you start to have nights that stay warmer than 50 degrees and you get a mass push of bass shallow. The same thing happens, but when the temperature is dropping. So you have a front come through. It's going to be windy, north wind. You're going to have a couple days like today where it's sunny, clear, there's no clouds in the sky. So my baits are going to be post-frontal baits, my favorite baits, but this time of year. So here's the deal. You have a lot of spots on your lake that are good when you don't have a lot of fishing pressure. And that to me means that they're places where people want to fish just as bad as bass want to live. Those two kind of offset each other, and those places don't always have fish on them. This time of year where you're getting a big push like you do late spring, that's going to make those spots a lot better than they are. And you don't have to go there on a Tuesday when no one is out on the lake to catch a bass. They'll be there on Saturday. So I'm going to give you a couple different places. So I have a island that I fish around a lot, and it's obvious. It looks great. It's a bunch of shallow water touching a bunch of deep water. So it's a great place for a school of fish to pull up, and you just run up there and catch them, and they're there to feed, and they're easy to catch. Now, what typically happens is there's a boat sitting there every single day, and you don't hardly ever get to be the first boat there, and you don't catch them there a whole lot because of that reason. Now, this time of year, that spot is full of fish. And I don't know if I'm still sharing that spot with a bunch of other fishermen, but I can tell you that there are a lot of fish there. And maybe there's not as much fishing pressure because the outdoorsy type is in the woods hunting. Could be a big part of this. But I will say that you're getting a push. The same thing will happen with short, smaller pockets, like the most shallow flats connected to where the deepest part of that pocket is. So you could have docks or it could be a point, but you run in there, drop the trolling motor, start fishing, you typically can get bit on those places. So short pockets, very big, and then those big flats that are touching deep water that are just obvious. You always run by that thinking I should be able to catch a fish. This is the time of the year where that will work. Now, I'm going to give you a couple different baits because, again, we're looking at post-frontal conditions. You have a rising barometer, and it just gets funky out there. Now, I've got some options earlier in the year, and these are going to be similar as we get later into the year. So the first one for me is going to be a buzzbait. It seems like there is a magic water temperature window and a time of year, the fall, but cooler water for me has always been a better option for the buzzbait. Now, here we go. We're not super cold water. We are an active feeding water temp, is what I would like to call it. A buzzbait seems to generate bigger strikes now than it does any other time of the year. And I also feel like if you have a grass lake, the grass is kind of dying off, and those fish that were tucked up in the grass are out on the edge. The buzzbait's the perfect option for that. Maybe you have a lake that they draw down to the winter pool this time of year. Same situation. There's a lot of crayfish and stuff up on the bank, and that buzzbait is imitating something that is running off the bank into the water. Another great option there. So anytime you have a rising barometer, you're going to have some bubbles and stuff on the surface when your buzzbaits come back, but you will also just have days where it's not doing that, and that's fine as well. So you may have a sunny, no cloud day. A buzzbait will catch them as long as you have some cover. Grass being the most important thing, but I live on a lake that typically you can't catch big ones on a buzzbait. This time of year you can. So I will also throw a swim jig. I know I've been talking a lot about a swim jig, but rising barometer, a swim jig is one of those baits that just catches bass when everything else doesn't. Now, all these baits I'm giving you are baits that don't make any noise. I don't know if that is a similarity or a coincidence, but all these baits are silent. So a swim jig, one of my favorites, and I've talked a lot about this, but here's the deal. You get into that short pocket where you typically know is a good fishing spot, but it's hard to catch fish there. You get in there, you cover some water, and they are typically loaded. So you go into that first little dock slip, you get a couple bites, you go to the next one, you get a couple bites. So it's not like one fish just pulled up there, a whole school of bass came out of the deep and went shallow. So you need something that you can fish fast, cover some water. Now, rising barometer is going to put bass on objects. So you need a flipping bait. So for me, it is going to be a finesse jig and a heavy finesse jig. So one that has a little bit stronger hook. I can rig it up on 17-pound test, a lighter action flipping stick, or like a 7'3" medium heavy action rod, depending on what brand rod you use. But this is going to be something that I'm going to put on the targets, because rising barometer is going to put fish on docks, laydowns, stumps, and you need something that you can just put in their location and just shake. Now, the last one would be a fluke. Because I am getting bites, the fishing is going to be tough when it comes to using fishing lures. You know, as much as I like to think that bass feed more on cloudy, rainy, overcast days, I just feel like fishing lures work better. You know, there's less visibility, there's a bigger strike window. They don't need to see, you know, how real it is. They're not getting that close of a look at it. So I feel like lures just work better on overcast, low pressure days. I don't necessarily always think that fish feed more those days or whatever. You know, if it's a long front, I don't feel like just because you have suitable conditions for fishing lures, that necessarily means that the fish are going to be biting better. I think they just bite lures better. So for that reason, I need a bait that will work in all conditions, and that's a fluke, because I can fish it slow on the bottom if need be. Up in the water column, they come up schooling or something like that, and then it's the most natural presentation you can give them. The swim, back to the swim jig, because we are, you know, we're jumping around here, but back to the swim jig, because I feel like the swim jig or a little swim bait, pretty much the same thing. You can rig up a little swim bait on a swim jig, or just throw a little swim bait, but you're basically giving the fish the same presentation. This would be something, you know, a little bit less water clarity or something like that, or maybe you're fishing it around cover like docks or something where they can't get that good of a look at it. You're fishing around shadows. They're kind of looking at the bait behind dock posts and stuff like that. So this might get their attention a little bit better than a swim bait, but pretty much the same bait. But that's it. And I'm going natural. I don't want whites and all of that. I want, you know, this is a color called bait fish. All that glitter in there is going to shine in that sun, and it's going to make that bait look really realistic. So that is a Zoom Super Fluke and bait fish. But that's it. And again, don't rule out those spots that haven't been any good the last couple months, that are typically only good like earlier in the year. They're going to start to play. You kind of have a miniature spring time fishing here for the next couple of weeks, after these fish are feeling the effects of the first cool front that lasted longer than a day or two. So try that, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.